You are listening to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsor, MSP-Ignite. MSP-Ignite offers a peer group experience that is unique to managed service providers in the technology industry. If you are serious about implementing a model for success through sharing and collaboration of best practices, this is the best way to do it. Head on over to msp-ignite.com to get more information. All right, on to the show. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined by Art Gross of Breach Secure Now, HIPAA Secure Now. Is there any other names I need to add to that?
And Skyber is the insurance company. So, and Integration is the MSP. So yeah, we got four companies there.
Nice. 4 companies. We go back to when you and I first met. There was only one. It was HSN, the HIPAA Secure Now. And a lot has changed over the last 5-6+ years. You and I have gone back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn. And this week's topic, like many topics, is driven by a comment, a phrase, a problem, you name it, all prevailing around cybersecurity. You had mentioned almost in a poll-like question, are you doing tabletop exercises around the idea of a breach or a ransomware or an incident of any kind, really, to just say, hey, if this happened, what would the steps get taken? Real quick, I kind of ran into this in a similar way, unrelated to cybersecurity, but with school districts, they do emergency evacuation of a school bus.
Right.
And I thought, well, why is that so important? Like, it's pretty clear that the door in the back, which says for emergency use only, would be used in the event of emergency. So I got to go and participate, and I found it really interesting because I had never really thought like how important a school bus emergency evacuation drill really was until I went through one. And so fast forward to this conversation, why have we not spent more time with our clients and ourselves doing emergency response drills or tabletop exercises?
I think a couple of reasons, and it was a poll that I put, and 60% of the MSPs said they were not doing it. I think 25% said they didn't know how to do it.
Right.
20% said their clients weren't interested, and the others just said they weren't doing. And I think just a fundamental, a step back. I believe you need to do this because clients and MSPs don't understand the pain of ransomware. They don't understand the pain of a data breach.
Right.
We say ransomware, and it sounds like a scary thing, but if you really peel back the layers, it's even much more scary than just the word. It is
right.
It's literally life or death of a company, and it could be life or death of your MSP as well. So, I think tabletop exercises reveal that to clients, how bad this is, why you need forensics, why, legal counsel, why reputation damage, why credit monitoring, why all of the pieces of what could happen in that event. And I encourage everyone to be doing a lot more of these exercises.
Do you think part of this is sort of the lack of recognizing when we're living an incident? Like, I think about what happened this last year with COVID, and we all transitioned the workforce to work remote. And now I've got several of these clients where they're like, hey, I got this questionnaire, and they're asking what we do in the event of an internet outage in our office. And I'm like, aren't you kind of living that right now? I mean, It wasn't internet. It was like pandemic, go work from home. And now the office of 30 is 30 offices of one. Like, but I don't think very many people recognize that that's actually what happened. We totally went into a true situation that required a disaster recovery plan.
Absolutely. And, it's a great point because we lived in that whole transition, and, the world has changed. And I was going to say, I talked to a lot of partners. We have 1,600 partners for BSN, and I'm in, Facebook groups and LinkedIn. A lot of MSP says, I don't want to sell on FUD, fear.
Right.
And I say, it's not FUD anymore. This is reality. This is happening. Ransomware is a reality that if your clients don't understand what this is and they're not prepared, you're not doing your job. You're not selling fear. You're selling truth. I mean, it's going to happen, whether it's targeted or whether it's some, a million emails sent out. One of your clients' employees could get caught in that web.
Well, rewind. You and I both know Mike Simmel well. He has spent and is spending the last decade on the FUD, right? Like if anybody were to sell the fear model, he does it probably better than anybody. And then he goes into the whole legal and criminal, and like by the time he's done talking, you're like, go ahead, lock me up, right?
Exactly.
And
Yep.
and I think that while I agree with that, I think what's changed is we no longer have to be the conduit of fear to the client. We have to be the conduit of hope. Like
Yeah.
we have to be like, these bad things are happening. They're going to continue happening. And our job isn't anymore to just prepare you for the bad event that is inevitable. It's to say, what if we can minimize the impact? What if we can reduce, if not remove, the damage to your business, whether it's through reputation or any number of things? Because outside of data being stolen anymore, the encryption of your environment isn't what's as crippling as it once was. We have so many ways to detect. We have so many different ways to recover from in a very efficient, if not almost instant model. It's now about, what about the data?
What about the data?
Who has my data?
Yeah, who's got it, and what are they going to release? What are they going to extort, and what's the damage of that data?
And does it matter? As so many businesses are hung up on like, it's the end of the world to my company if this got leaked. And you're like, what is it that you think is so valuable? Because, we are our own, worst enemy. And some of them, it's like when you're done going through it, it's like, no one cares about that information, and you're spending all these cycles on it. So I go back to the healthcare one where it's like, do you know where your EPHI is?
Right.
And if you do know where it is that where it should live? And if you got that solved, does everybody else understand and follow those same rules? Now we need to look at it for all data, right? And how many people are willing to do that?
No, and unfortunately not a lot, because it takes cycles out of growing your business, right? I'm a small business owner. I want to just grow my business. I want to do marketing. I want to do sales, and I don't want to do these non productivity based or sales based events. And so I don't find it important. But that is our job. Our job is to say, you need to do this, because in the event this happens, could be catastrophic. And so it's worth the investment here. And it's an interesting conversation that a lot of MSPs are not good at, and a lot of clients don't want to hear, right? And
so talk about the cycles for a minute. So I go back to Brian Weiss when he and I sat down and he talked to me about the wanna cry, made him want to cry, life-changing event. 2 years was his cycle, right? Before he had a net new client to add, he took 2 years to make sure that this was going to be not happening again. So I think about what you said, these are cycles that we don't want to go through because we want to grow our business. We want to increase the revenue. What do you think a cycle looks like? I gave an extreme example. I'm sure there's lots of them, but what kind of cycle or timeline should an MSP be investing in, say, and we haven't gotten really to it yet, but like a tabletop exercise with a client, or even just a tabletop exercise internally that one could share with a client?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be that involved, at least as a first step. Sitting down and with a client and walking them through potentially what happens. There's one. I look at the first tabletop exercise as an education. Let's talk about who am I going to call at 7:00 at night on a Saturday? What are they going to do? Who's going to call the lawyer? What lawyer are you going to call? What are we going to do to who's got the key to the office, so we can go there and shut down, literally pull the plugs out of the wall because they're all connected, or whatever that is. Those conversations, the clients come back and say, why would you need to do that? You get to educate them on that. So I actually think if you do this in one of your QBRs or one of the, let's take some time and walk through this, it starts to get the client thinking about, well, who's the team, who's the response team, what do we have to do? I think that could drive the conversation so much further than us talking about BDR and I'll just restore the data. You want to get that client involved.
It's almost like changing the conversation. You said QBR, but I think about the client onboarding opportunity where you're like, and this is the MSA that you signed, and this is how we're going to get started. And oh, by the way, here's the team and points of contact for different things. How well are we doing that piece, or is it glazed over? And it's like, no, really, like you need to make sure that in your cell phone, this number is in there for that speed dial. I gave the example earlier when we were talking. I had been an employee of a company. I'd been gone for 10 years, and I was first phone call. It's midnight my time, and they're calling me, and I'm like, you have outsourced MSP. Like, what's happening here? Like, I can't help you. I mean, I can help you, but not in the same way that they can.
Yep. Yeah. I think as MSPs, we need to really think through what services. Here's the other piece. MSPs have to think about this themselves, because if you're involved in the middle of a ransomware attack, yes, you can control the data aspect of restoring the data, but you can't control. A lot of MSPs aren't good at the forensics, good at the reputation damage, good at negotiating Bitcoin payments to criminals. If I'm an MSP, I don't want to be in that spot. I mean, I want to focus on the things that I'm good at. I don't want to, but the client, and this, the client will say, well, go pay, tell them that we're not going to pay that much. It's like, you don't want to be that party. At least talking through a tabletop exercise of who is going to negotiate with the criminal for this reduced ransom.
Right.
The client, your business owner is going to say, aren't you going to do it? And if I'm an MSP, I get that opportunity to tell you, I don't do that. I mean, don't think I'm going to do that, because I'm not negotiating with criminals. You're not paying me.
And the clock's ticking once that happens. And so as a former expert negotiator, the one time that I participated, the one that we discovered that was nightmarish. They're all nightmare. But what was interesting is, these guys are running real businesses, right? And they have customer service and HR and health plans. Like, surprisingly, they run better than potentially a lot of MSPs. And ours was really interesting because, of course, the chat starts, the little chat window pops up, and at the top it says, we expect you to act courteously and nice to or consequences will ensue. And the particular ransom, I think, started out around $250,000, and inevitably I think we got it down to some minuscule amount of like $10,000, which is always a worry. Like, okay, so is this going to happen again? We never did pay the ransom, but during the negotiation process, what was interesting is they wanted it in, I can't remember the currency. It wasn't Bitcoin, but in order to get to the currency that they wanted us to use, we had to convert from one cryptocurrency to another. And that was going to take 24 to 48 hours, of which we didn't have. So we were already on a clock that I think we had 20 hours left. And now we're negotiating an extension. And so they're like, the numbers started climbing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And to be honest, if I'm an MSP, I don't want to be negotiating that. I don't, there is some legal ramifications, right?
Especially now.
Yeah. Right. So now I don't want to be doing that. And I'm not good at that. It's almost the same thing that we say to clients, when we had like SQL servers and Exchange servers. Don't let your in-house IT upgrade these servers, because they don't do it every day.
Right.
I do it every day. I am experts at Exchange and SQL. I don't want to be a negotiating ransomware when I don't do that every day. And it really is. So MSPs, that conversation is a very valuable conversation to the client. And it's a very valuable conversation for the client to hear, because they don't actually understand what's involved in this process.
And even if you never pay a ransom, you still probably need a negotiator, because that is buying you time. Exactly. In a lot of cases, from just basically making it so that the lights just don't go completely out.
And the thing is, as everybody knows now, it's not just about encryption. It's about release of data. So even though I, as an MSP, may have a great solution and I can restore your data, like from image-based backups, like I can restore your data very quickly, get you back up and running. They still have your data and they are threatening to release it. Now, if you're healthcare, if you're legal, you don't want your clients' data out on the internet. Now you have a problem. I can't control that aspect of it.
Right.
What are you going to do? So don't, but if you start having those conversations with clients, they start to think through, that's a bad thing. We wouldn't want that to happen. How do we prevent that? Boom. Right. Then you start selling cybersecurity solutions. So, I mean, I think these tabletop exercises, they don't have to be that involved. In fact, I think if you make them too involved, the client will get, this is too much. I don't want to be involved. If you can keep it at least at the high level to begin with,
Yeah.
and then subsequent, let's peel down, let's drill down into some of the more details. I think they can go a long way in a sales cycle, education cycle, and prevention cycle.
So let's think about that for a minute. I was thinking about this as well. If I were to do a tabletop exercise, where would I start? And it actually happened because I was in this particular client calls them QSRs, quarterly service review, primarily because the idea of using the B sounds salesy. And I said, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but that got me thinking, like, why am I getting on this quarterly call? Am I doing a good job? Yep. Do I need to sell you something, et cetera? So the selling comes out of it. But I was thinking about, as I was going through it, what are the things that a client needs to be thinking about as we look at the forecast of 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, things that get out of warranty, all those things that we talk about. Yep. I was thinking, like, the first thing that I would want to do after having gone through that one is, do you know who your points of contact are and who your first phone call is going to go to? And okay, let's walk through that. And when I say walk through that, pick up the phone and make a phone call, open a ticket, make sure you put in the subject line, this is a test, so no one freaks out on you. But what does that look like? Do you know what that would look like? Because I was candid with the client after the QSR, and I'm like, do you understand what you have at your fingertips in the event something happens? Prior to that, they've been a client for 9 months. Prior to that, they had no idea.
Right. It's totally. And if I can't get a hold of you in we have 20 hours and you're for some reason on vacation, who is next in charge? Right. And if I call them and say, you're a ransomware victim, they have your data, they're threatening to release it. What is that next person going to do? What's the call? Is it to a cyber insurance company? Is it to a lawyer? Do I have a managed, security, and an MSSP? Who are they? What are they going to do? And that really gets the client going, I don't know. Aren't you going to take care of it? No, I'm not going to be able to.
And you maybe shouldn't, right? Like, I think that's some of the pieces that are also missed. So I had one that was really interesting the other day. It was put out by a housing authority that's part of their sort of security. And quite honestly, overall, the control set looked pretty good. They gave really solid examples to help their clients in the housing authority go through this. But they had a incident response template that they provided, and it stepped through, like, who should be getting phone calls. The MSP or IT department was like 5th or 6th on the list. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this should be like the first phone call, because you may be able to just stop what's happening. Right. Even if it's a hypothetical, like, let's at least try that route.
Yeah. But, it depends. I totally agree. Your IT needs to work on the technical aspects. But at the same time, number 2 should be, who are, is it law firm that's good with this type of negotiating? Is it your insurance company? Is it the vendors that you have lined up? Because part of this tabletop exercise, at least it gets the conversation of, who are you going to call after you call me? Who are you going to call next? And well, I don't have anyone lined up. Well, let's work on getting you somebody to call that we can work with. Otherwise, we're going to sit here going, Google, and as you were saying before, let's Google how to convert Bitcoin to another cryptocurrency. Right. And you don't. And meanwhile, we only have 20 hours to get this done. And I've never done it before.
Well, and it was funny. So you think that the bad guys that want the money would be so helpful. And they're like, they didn't know either. Like the guy that was on the chat was like, apparently he's relatively new to the dark world of being evil. He'd just been converted himself.
He's entry level.
He's entry level.
We all hired entry level help desk.
Yeah, he was the level 1 bad guy, right?
Yeah, right.
So that kind of leads to, like, sort of, we've done a tabletop exercise. We've allowed for, I don't want to say doom and gloom, but we've really said the reality is things like this will happen. Right. What's the first thing you're going to do? So we've talked about this as at the beginning of the episode. talk to me about, you've mentioned reputation management. You talked about like, do you know who is the right person to call? So whether it's legal, some states it might be you need to call law enforcement immediately and at least get that record on file that you've done this, even if it was just a, hey, we'll be there tomorrow kind of thing.
Or FBI or one of those. Yes.
Yeah. I think the rule of thumb is who's the closest to come to your office and start working through that Rolodex. So like where I'm at, my first phone call, if I wanted to go by proximity, the state patrol is, I can almost hit it with a rock, and then it's the county sheriff's department, and then around the corner is the police. So by proximity of who can get there the fastest, do you have a suggestion? I don't want to say we need to come up with a checklist, but is there like a high level, like these 4 things you need to have with a plan of how you're going to reach out? Because then all of the other, like the work part, then can begin to sort of recover from or mitigate.
Right. Well, definitely, your MSP, that one's easy. I actually think a law firm, a lot of law firms now are really experts in cybersecurity and breach response. They will handle some of that negotiation. They will handle, what is the breach notification that you have to do. And they also have, partnerships with other companies that can help you with forensics and remediation. So I would actually look for a law firm that is, experts on cybersecurity and cyber response. And then again, I would also make sure that I had cyber insurance. I mean, I think the easiest for an SMB is to make sure that they have a good cyber insurance policy, because that most of these policies have breach response. So you can get your, legal counsel, you can get your forensics, you can get your, your mitigation, you can get your, reputation damages and all of that stuff. So in a way that makes it a lot easier. Either that, or you partner with someone who has those vendors in their Rolodex. So
it's relatively a short list, but they're pretty significant. Like you're not going to take a shortcut and go, well, I've got the MSP covered, I think I'm good.
Yeah, no. In fact, that's part of the tabletop saying, if I'm an MSP saying, okay, you start with me, who's number 2, who's number 3, because you're going to need these services. Right. And let's make sure we walk through it. And yes, I will, as an MSP, I will work with forensics. I will work with your lawyer. I will get the information. But, before we get there, I'll do whatever I can from a technical side. But, we need to work as a group. And when the lawyer wants to make, when, do you want to release this to the press? You're going to have to make that decision, not me. So, and it's interesting if you start to actually show this is a sample press release, you'll have to make decisions on what happened. What are you doing to prevent it? How are you protecting your customers? Right. Your customers' eyes, your clients' eyes are going to light up. Like, I'm going to have to do this potentially, and I think that is such a great exercise for that client to know. It's hard to say, I don't have time to train my employees. Right. It's like relatively inexpensive. You see that. It's like, how do we stop this? In fact, if I'm an MSP, I want to go through that and the words, how do we prevent this bad event from happening? Boom, that's gold right there. Now the value of your cybersecurity stack has been shown, and now you can implement that, I believe. I mean, not everyone. It's not 100%, but I think it really helps.
Well, there's a pattern that has emerged in this entire conversation, and that is I either don't have time or I don't have the resources, and you're taking away my productivity and efficiency if you add security layers. And it's funny because I did a conversation with Marcus Ranum, co-founder of Tenable, and just a great all around guy to talk to about cybersecurity, because he's retired now and he now looks at things through the lens of on the outside looking in, and just not having really to deal with it. And what really frustrates him and I think it resonates with this conversation is that if we were to just say, what do you need to use? Like, what are the things that are important to you? So let's just try to be high level and go, okay, it's 365, it's Salesforce, Dropbox, whatever. Okay, let's go in and say, those are the only 3 things we're going to allow in and out of your network. We would solve 80% of our security problems. But as soon as you have that conversation, the client immediately says, well, what if we need something else?
Right.
You're gonna force us to go through opening a ticket and all
Right.
that. Well, that would just take away all of our productivity. And it's like, well, on the other end of this spectrum is we didn't lock it down to that level, and you're calling me in the middle of the night to say, yeah, it wasn't Dropbox, but a couple people downloaded it.
And so, zero trust is the way to go, but it's hard to implement that if the client says, I don't want to do that. So, it's always a balance. And some MSPs are really good at dictating, this is what we're going to do for you to be a client. That's what we're going to do. Other MSPs are, on the other side of the spectrum, the client drives that conversation. I think the happy medium is somewhere in between, where you're suggesting there's some things that are, it's almost like, you won't take a client if they say, I don't want a firewall. I don't want antivirus or a firewall. If I ask you, do you want a firewall? No. Do you want antivirus? No. Okay, we won't put that in. No, I mean, this is included in my services. This is what we will do. Now, there's some things that, they're optional. I think we have to start to take more and more of that approach. And because it's really, the whole thing is from an MSP lens, it is a shared risk. A client gets
100%.
If a client is involved in a data breach, ransomware attack, this is on you. All your resources will be going to supporting that client. The rest of your clients won't get what they need, and the liability that you're sitting in there is great, and you don't want this.
Well, and it's interesting the language that's being used, right? We refer to them as our clients, right? We refer to them as our customers, if you choose to be so, or maybe we say partner. But if you look at it through the lens of the client looking at us, we're their IT department, we're an extension of their company. So when I think about it through that context, it's like we're merged into, we're the axle that all these spokes are coming off of. So there's all these segue entry points into me, but more importantly, anybody that attacks me has an opportunity to, go to everybody that works with me. I'm the bigger liability almost in the equation than my clients are, because if I'm compromised, they all feasibly are. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think it's also a way of differentiating yourself. A lot of MSPs are competing on price, and if you start to explain the fact that MSPs are at risk, I mean, it's a dangerous conversation, but if you can prove that you've implemented the controls and you've taken cybersecurity seriously on your MSP, and the person who is, the cheapest that you think is going to provide the same service that I am, they're your risk,
right?
And you don't. This is kind of where you don't want to take the cheapest. You want to make sure you have the most secure MSP, so you don't become the victim because pass through my being breached.
So basically, I mean, the reality is any client that is competitively bidding on price for their MSP had better have a really comprehensive checklist, so that number 9 or 10. Sure, that can be cost driven. I get it. It is a competitive world out there. But if it's 1 through 3, any of those 3, I'd even say if it's in 1 through 5, something's not right about the one that's low bidding everybody else in the room. No. We're about out of time. I wanted to touch on one more thing. You have expanded, obviously, multiple companies now that have evolved out of what started out as HIPAA Secure now. One of the things that comes up quite frequently for MSPs more and more, whether it's being driven by something that they're doing with, say, an organization like you, or it's being driven by their client's client, is an insurance questionnaire, right? And I've seen insurance questionnaires that vary from all over, that, questions like, do you use an RMM? Is it on-prem or hosted? And the list kind of goes on and on. Is there a high-level questionnaire, or even a questionnaire that you can recommend for MSPs? Like, before you start talking to an insurance broker, like, go through this list and start to get prepared. Because I would think if I was going to talk to you to get an insurance policy, if I came a little bit more prepared to say, hey, look, I don't know what your questionnaire looks like. This is what I've got so far. What does that look like?
Yeah. So, insurance companies are, there's a couple of biggies, right? They want to make sure that you have MFA or 2FA implemented on everything. They want to make sure you have data backup a backup and a recovery plan.
Sure.
But there's also this thing called reasonable security measures. All right.
Right.
And usually when we talk about reasonable security measures, that's doing security risk assessments. That's having written policies and procedures that are being followed. That's training employees. Those three things are really a something that insurance companies, lawyers are looking for that. If you're breached, did you implement reasonable security? So between reasonable security, administrative, which is the risk assessments, policies, training, technical, 2FA, encryption, and disaster recovery. Those are like the biggies right there.
Right. So really at the end of the day, what's critical is that you have evidence to support following a process that would ensure reasonable security best practices, mapped to frameworks that are easily recognized. So it's not just like, well, I came up with my own set of controls and we require passwords.
Okay, right. Exactly.
So Art, as we close out, where can people find you?
I am all over social media, social networks. I'm heavy involved on LinkedIn, on a lot of the Facebook groups, the MSP Facebook groups. Also artg@breachsecurenow.com. I'd be happy to talk to people. If you have questions on training employees, on cybersecurity, cyber insurance, I'm all over the spectrum there.
All right. Well, I appreciate it as always. I know taking the time out to do this is important for our audience. I really appreciate it. And for those of you listening, thanks and have a great week.